I'm a fifth-generation Washingtonian, and it's, I got to say, I'm 55 years old, and how weird this is to be in this building on this ground, because I remember when this was all farmland. I had a neighbor growing up who was a Senate staffer, a Senate Appropriations Committee staffer for 40 years, and he was the cheapest dude you'd ever met in your life, and he saved every penny. He was so cheap, he literally would go to the thrift store and buy shirts. And when the cuffs would wear out, he'd go back and buy another shirt that was mostly worn out and have holes, and he'd cut the cuffs off those, and he would sew them back on. And you'd see this guy going off to work, hello, mister, I'll leave his name out, and you know, it would be like a pink shirt with yellow cuffs. But he did this for years and years and years, and he saved it, and he plowed it on real estate, and he owned, finally he decided to sell it all off. It's basically all of Tyson's 2. So he's not doing the cheap cuffs thing anymore. So it's, what's that? He sold to the learners. Yes, no, this was literally all cow country out there, and there was nothing. So, but I am a townie. And it's a little tough talking to folks from here, because I mean, for better or worse for guys, I mean, we may be physically outside the Beltway, but we live in the Beltway, and it's just, right? It's no matter what political stripe you are, you're pretty much at the end of your rope probably. So I'm not going to try and get into the politics so much, but what I'm trying to do here is, and I'm giving you, hopefully giving you an insight into what I'm telling and advising our portfolio managers at DWS, particularly our fixed income guys. Here's the things to watch for that we're watching for domestically and geopolitically around the corner, right? That's the hardest thing. How do you turn the noise down and, all right, what's happening? Where is it happening? And when should we anticipate some movement in the market? And this has become, I used to be the sleepy guy that nobody wanted to talk to 10 years ago, and now I don't get any sleep at all, because the geopolitical, the domestic stuff, what's going to happen, when, and what should we be worried about? It is sort of extraordinary, and I think I'm probably speaking to some folks here because of the track record of this great firm. We have more millionaires than any other country in the world, right? We've watched the Dow go through the roof, yet somehow we are worried about these immigration battles. We've got battles over racial problems in Charlottesville and everything else. What is going on? Because, and I don't want to be a pop psychiatrist or sociologist, but I think this is very important to the politics and the decision making and to the market in particular. We're more divided than we've ever been in some ways, right? This is a Pew Research source, which, by the way, I do all open source stuff, right? So if you're curious, and we're more than happy, if this is of value to you, please have the guys will give it to you. And most of the stuff you just do the Google. It's fascinating. You can get all the Pew Research or Gallup or anything else you want. We're more divided than ever. We've got this overhang of what's happening in Washington like we probably haven't had since Nixon. I would argue it's maybe even a little uglier. And I worked through Iran-Contra. I remember Nixon, and I suspect many of you do too, coming home from school every day was, you know, there was the impeachment stuff, and I remember watching it. My parents made me watch it. These are the big issues that politicians, and I would very much argue the markets, are having a tough time trying to figure out. Demographics, technology, and migration, right? The demographics include this fact. For the first time ever, there are more people in the world over the age of 65 than under the age of 5. That's a big deal, because I'm 55, I'm starting to worry about what happens when I'm 65, 75. Who's going to take care of me, right? What is going on with all the technology? The world seems so uncertain. Then you get to the demographics. I mean, wow. So if it's tan, they're dead. They're dead. They have a negative birth rate that's almost impossible to reverse, particularly Russia. And I suspect there are people here who have either worked in the US government, CIA, Defense Department, everything else, who know this even better than I do. But you look at the fact that for Russia, for example, Russia is 700 people less per day. And that's not dying, that's leaving and or dying. 700 left a day are gone, right? And the problem is because of the corruption. If you're a young family, you're a young guy, you get married, you maybe have your PhD in electrical engineering. Where are the startups in Russia? Where's the Googles? Where's the Microsoft? It doesn't exist because you get stamped out by the government or somebody comes in and takes over your. So you're going to come somewhere to the West for greater opportunity. So you have this smart, young middle class just streaming out. I think the average age because of alcohol, all these other bad problems, something like 65 years of age. People are passing away. And it's a negative birth rate. To this day, there are certain states in Russia, sorry to be a little scandalous, the reproduction days. You get the day off, right? You get the day off. Good luck. Make Mother Russia a little bit bigger, right? And if you have children, not just tax benefits, but you get bonuses, it's still not working. For Putin, of course, this means he's dealing with an increasingly growing Muslim population coming out of Chechnya and everywhere else. This is why he's so interested in Syria. I feel like a kindergartner doing a presentation probably to a lot of experts here, but it's true. This is why he's so interested. China, because of the absolutely horrific one-child policy, right? You could only have one child. Well, what happened was when you crossed that with the fact that to have that child, and if she was a girl, you didn't want that girl, you'd get rid of that girl because you owed a dowry. So you have this disproportionate number of men, estimated as many as 40 or 50 million guys between the age of 20 and 40 who will never get married because there's no women. And now you're affluent and you have the opportunity to have children and that one-child policy is gone. It's like, thanks, but no thanks. I think we're going to go get ourselves a Porsche because they're making money. So you have this huge problem in China. Japan. You read the stories about Japan of just whole towns that are just empty, right? So these are the demographics. And then, of course, most importantly, from an economic perspective outside of China is Europe, right? And this is, they don't know what to do with themselves. Nobody's having children. It's all negative. Now, the United States is still good because of migration. Africa is extremely strong. Latin America is pretty good. It's good, right? Australia, everybody likes to live in Australia. But then add to this the technological issues. We all experience this. This is our fear. These are great things. But all of a sudden, it's starting to overtake us, and we're beginning to get worried about it. And for many of us here in this area, we're going to see this in a very specific way. It is, you see the Amazon blimp? That's an actual working blimp. They have a patent on it, from which drones, you can see the drones around there, right? They're going to be delivering stuff.
Like the mothership.
Exactly, the mothership.
Oh, cool.
Right? So it's going to be, I need new detergent. I don't have milk. But Alexa, I need milk. This is honest to God what's going to happen. And it's coming very fast. All of a sudden, milk's out front being handed to you by a drone. So this is where Amazon recently, did you see that they encouraged something like 10,000 of their drivers, we're going to lay you off, go become drivers for Amazon. Workers become drivers. Well, that's a short-term fix because you're going to get replaced by a drone. You have at the top there that weird sort of sleek thing. That's a driverless truck. The U.S. Postal Service is now driving driverless trucks between Phoenix and Houston every day delivering mail. Now, for many of you, you know that the U.S. Postal Service has one of the strongest unions around. All of a sudden, you're not, these guys aren't going to unionize, right? So you have that, you've got the drones, you've got our children and our grandchildren knowing more than anything that we are so behind, we still don't know how to fix our VCR, right? Thank you. What's a VCR? I didn't pay her to make any of these comments, but I want them to keep coming. How about this, right? At what point, if you are a medical professional are you at risk? You've gone to school and you've gotten all these degrees or whatever, you're a nurse, and you're going to be a visiting nurse because you're going to take care of these 10 older people who need help. No, you don't. We're going to have this in our house. And there's going to be one person controlling 10 of them and making sure you get your meds on time, being able to check your pulse, right, with regularity, never missing a beat, on call, watching you 24/7. Okay, so now we're talking about delivery people. Now we've moved up to nurses, right? Any of you here have experienced what my 25-year-old son who's in Raleigh, North Carolina, works, got a fantastic job at a tech company. His doctors that the company supplies, you see them by FaceTime. They'll also do therapy, psychiatric therapy by FaceTime and make prescriptions for you, right? These people he's seeing live in Oregon, Wyoming. So you have that. So all of a sudden you're seeing this sort of, no matter where you are in the pecking order financially, you kind of feel that something's coming at you. And where am I? And this adds to this whole sense of unhappiness and what's going to happen. I'll tell you, this is honest to God true story. Well, let me just give it to you this way. If you're a taxi driver, who do you hate most? You hate the Uber and Lyft driver because he's just taking your business out. If you're an Uber or Lyft driver, who do you hate? You hate your bosses because Uber and Lyft have both signed deals with Ford and General Motors, respectively, to create fleets of driverless cars to put you out of business, right? And once that happens, and between Amazon and everything else, if you're a FedEx delivery guy, so those guys make over $100,000 a year, and a lot of them own their own trucks, they're going to be out of business soon. And if you're a truck driver, you're going to be out of business soon. But here's the big one. Airline pilots. Anybody here an airline pilot? Retired? It's a well-paid job, highly skilled. A year ago, I had dinner with the CFO of Lufthansa. And after a couple good bottles of German wine, I said, we fly drones all around the world. Why are we still have airline pilots? No offense. But they're very well, you can be more senior you are, quite well paid. And she said, we could do it tomorrow. Just a question of passenger comfort. They all like to come in. Am I wrong? Well, he looks good. Right? So at some point soon, there won't be a pilot there. And there won't be a stewardess there. There'll be some robot abusing you, throwing peanuts at you, right? So if you're educated, what are you getting? And then you have the migration issue. This is a picture in Greece of migrants coming in from Syria and Iraq and everything else. What we saw a couple years ago, they're all recharging their phones. So the whole idea of migration and immigration as we've known it is totally different. They know exactly where they're going. They all have GPS, and they're able to find out, here I am in Greece. I could take this train, and I can get to Dusseldorf, and there's a job, and I just applied for it online. I'll be there in 48 hours. I got a job. Wow. Right? It ain't what my Irish grandmother came over in a boat, started scrubbing floors in the Waldorf Astoria and became the head maid. That's gone. These people are immediately in the workforce and getting established. So these things are driving societally people to a point where they don't know which end is up, which end is down. And this is a global phenomenon. So you have all of that, and where are we? And how does this impact you and your investments? One, I am not a financial advisor. I'm not here to say go fixed income equities. But I suspect a lot of you are going increasingly fixed income to be careful, right? You're worried about the equity markets because the geopolitical and domestic stuff up and down. You're still a little worried because you see the President of the United States bashing the head of the Fed. You're not quite certain what's got negative interest rates in Germany all over. If you go to Denmark, they will pay you money to take out a mortgage. They're advertising, it will give you the equivalent of 10,000 euros if you take out a mortgage. right? How does negative interest rates, that's kind of weird. I don't get that, right? But this is the kind of thing that we're in at this point. Here in the United States, I'm going to put the noise of impeachment aside, but I'm happy to take questions at some point here. I think, quite frankly, we're not going to see anything legislatively between now and November. That can be good, that can be bad. For Democrats, they had a very bold agenda, which would have been have a significant market impact, right? Climate change legislation. They put out the Green New Deal. If they had moved on that and started negotiating with Republicans in the Senate, they might have gotten something. Not going to happen. So in terms of energy, in terms of significant retrofitting of businesses, in terms of outlawing cows, in terms of, right, all that, that's not going to happen. So there's a predictability. Tax reform. I'm assuming most people here live in Virginia. We don't live in California or in New York, where your state and local tax deduction was taken away from you, and that hurt a lot. We expected that to be fixed. Not going to be fixed. So there's just going to be, the predictability here is nothing. Nothing will happen. So you're able to look out for more than a year in terms of anything significant that will impact positive or negative. So again, I'm trying to be sort of amoral here politically, or just sort of purely focused on your portfolio. The impeachment, that's going to keep going. I think it continues probably until January 1st. And if they don't have anything at that point, I think it kind of goes by the by. And we'll just be in an election cycle, and then...
Unlike any we have ever seen before.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Which, again, I don't want to sound greedy, who makes money off of it? The media, right? So the head of entertainment, and I used to have this great slide going into the elections, head of entertainment at NBC for years and years and years was a guy named Zucker. Does anybody know what he's doing now? He's head of CNN. The man who created Donald Trump and The Apprentice for 14 years, top-rated show in America, top-rated show in Mexico, top-rated show in the Philippines, is now the head of CNN and has been for the last 3 years. Ratings. The money's gone through the roof. Same thing with Fox, same thing at MSNBC. The money they're making off this is fantastic. If that's what, Time Warner, go for it, right? So, but again, I turn all those off. I'm a Bloomberg guy, so I just like to watch Bloomberg television. I kind of get it straight, don't get into all of it, read 5 newspapers a day and move on. So legislatively, I think there's a lot of predictability. Again, let's just sort of push away the smoke of impeachment and the headlines constantly. What's beneath that we need to focus on? Here's a big one. The FANGs, as they call them, right? Facebook, Amazon, Google, I can't remember all of them. The issue of privacy, the issue of advertising, the antitrust implications. This is a big deal. Do we all remember what happened to Big Tobacco a number of years ago when all the state attorney generals got together and whacked them? Multi-billion-dollar settlement that created all these funds, which the states used to educate people not to smoke. It also helped build infrastructure for a lot of cities and states. Here we go again. There's nothing new under the sun. So you're now seeing all the state attorney generals coming together doing antitrust investigations. Google, others. And there's likely to be this sort of settlement again. Now, again, I know this sounds cold. What's the positive? This is how states make extra money to build infrastructure and do other things. But this is the big one to watch. And add to that the Europeans are after our big high-tech companies for tax issues and antitrust issues. I don't know how there can be antitrust issues because the Europeans have nothing to put up against it, to be totally blunt, right? Does anybody here invest in any high-tech companies in Europe, are there any actual high-tech companies in Europe other than SAP and maybe one or two others, right? It just doesn't exist. That's why we're dominant. So I would watch this very, very carefully. Again, pushing away the smoke, this is what to watch for. And the US Congress on a bipartisan basis is looking at this as well. And the Justice Department and the Federal Trade Commission are all investigating. So this could be the next big thing that sort of hits, sort of a hammer blow. Think again like the tobacco settlements back in the day. The other big issue, I get this question a lot, particularly from big corporate clients. Okay, so if the economy is going to be sinking, or we're worried about where things go, what can Congress do to stimulate the economy? And my short answer is nothing. There's no money to do it. So I wouldn't expect anything, and I don't say that as a political thing, that Democrats will want to tank the economy. No, there's just nothing there they can do, right? There's no money for infrastructure or anything else. Deficit, nobody's talking about it. It's amazing how this used to be the biggest issue in the world, and we don't talk about it anymore. I suspect if Donald Trump runs or is reelected, or this will be one of his campaign themes. If you notice, the president has not really laid out his campaign. What is he going to do for a second 4 years? I predicted that this is it. A lot of people are sort of shocked at that idea because Donald Trump, if you knew what he was like in the hotel business, real estate, I think he said it best. If the bank lends you $100,000, you don't sleep at night. If the bank lends you, $3 or $4 billion, they don't sleep at night, right? I think he will tackle this and potentially as well, perhaps Social Security reform. And one of the things I think that they will be looking at, knowing the staff around him, it's not cutting back Social Security entitlement, but it's basically blowing open the ability to people save in IRAs, 401ks, and other investment vehicles. How do we use the market to backfill what we have given away and don't have? Federal Reserve. Earmuffs. So my colleague in our Washington office has known Jay Powell for 30 years. And he is the godfather of her nephew. She saw Jay a month ago. And she walks up and she goes, "Jay!" And he looks at her like this. "Jay, what's the matter?" He goes, "What did you say, Judy?" And he was being funny, of course. And she goes, "What the hell are you doing?" And he laughs and he tells her the story that he had gotten a call several weeks ago, prior to this, from Ben Bernanke and Alan Greenspan had gotten on a call together and called him. And they get on and first thing out of their mouths are earmuffs, meaning just put earmuffs on, do what you got to do, focus on the economy, don't worry what the president says, don't worry what Congress says, don't worry what anybody does. You do what you and the Fed team need to do. So I think he is going to be unflappable in terms he won't bend to any sort of political pressure, one way or the other. And even the president said himself several weeks ago, he's not going to fire him. Did anybody catch that? Because he knows he can't fire him. And he appointed him. He put him there. This whole Fed is his. Every member of the Fed Board of Governors except for one is his. So, but it's the perfect political foil. And guys, we're from Washington. We know how this works, right? So I don't anticipate any significant radical issues there. I think we will probably see another cut in rates. That's possibly going to happen. But it all depends on what happens with the China deal, which I'll come to in a minute. The elections, look, what a shot in the dark, right? I put this together and I had Bernie Sanders there. I think Bernie's gone. God bless him. He had 2 stents put in his heart, and he's going to participate in, but the problem is everybody's going to migrate away from him. And his poll numbers are going down. He raised a lot of money this last quarter, but they'll migrate to Elizabeth Warren, right? I think at best, Kamala Harris is a distant fourth, but this is going to be Warren versus Biden at this point. So how that plays out, I don't know. It's going to be quite a battle, I would argue, between now and we'll have a better sense of it, certainly in February. I think at that point we'll know who's sort of got the commanding lead and who will be the nominee. Just the simple. Does anybody here go to Real Clear Politics? It's the best. It's free. If you want to know what's going on, polls and everything else, and you don't want to watch TV or listen to anybody screaming, just go to realclearpolitics.com. You don't have to sign up. Nothing. Just go to it. It's awesome. It's got polls of every Senate seat, every House. It's awesome. Makes guys like me look smart. Look at that. The graphs and everything. I just cut and pasted that. For those of you who are either in love with Trump or hate him, I love this Kissinger quote. And Kissinger, the great historian, diplomacy and everything else. He's just one of those figures in history who appears from time to time to mark the end of an era and to force it to give up its old pretenses. I think it's very true, right? As I think back, the technology, the demographics, the migratory situation globally. Here you've got, think of this, Deputy Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia meeting with China, becoming their largest client. Wow, right? Boxing out the Iranians on oil. The Brexit situation, the end of empire. Not that it wasn't over before, but boy, it's really over now. It's a picture of a city in Russia that's empty. There's some fantastic, Jamestown Association or Jamestown Analytics or something like that, again, another free site that's done about the demographics of Russia. That's an entire city in Russia that could house 250,000 people. There's nobody there. There's something like 4,000 cities and towns in Russia that have a population of 2 or less. So where are we going to go? This is where I think it's important, the economic uptick, where the geopolitics come in. Despite all the huffing and puffing in Washington, it's serious, I don't mean to demean it, you're going to get NAFTA 2.0 done by the end of the year and approved, right? That's a positive economic overall. And the markets will appreciate that, so there'll be a rise. We've got a free trade agreement now with Japan. That hasn't been, the outlines of it still has to be finalized, fleshed out. That's a big deal, particularly for the agricultural sector in the United States. UK, once Brexit's done, President Trump will enter into a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom, with England. Now, that's a big deal because Trump, a lot of people don't realize this, he thinks of himself as English because his mother was Scottish, from Scotland. This is the reason he's got the golf course in Scotland, not because it's near St. Andrews and all these, because it's from the town his mother was from. In fact, if anybody, you remember when Trump had the big white tie and tails dinner with the Queen several months ago? That was really in honor of his mother, because when Queen Elizabeth was coronated, she had a ceremony in the house. He remembers it as a kid, where she was crying, listening to it on the radio, and she actually solemnly hung this beautiful portrait of the Queen up in the house, and the whole bit, and she took to her mannerisms. So this was in honor of his mother more than anything else. He wants to save England. That's very important from a trade perspective. It's very important from a financial services perspective, because there will be likely an integration of New York, Wall Street, and London financial services and regulation, giving greater global reach for the United States financially. That'll be very interesting to make sure that those two cities maintain their sort of premier, they are the leading financial centers of the world. The EU, that's going to be a dogfight. You saw that President Trump, just because of the WTO, said that the Europeans have done stuff with Airbus they shouldn't. Trump is now Parmesan cheese. You've got until I think the 18th or something.
Carries old butter.
Scotch from Scotland. It's going up, right? The prices are all going up. So that's going to be the ugly one. China, and where's that going to go? So let's just talk about what Trump has been thinking about China and what goes into this. This isn't your typical trade war. This is, and I'm telling you because we have a former DWS executive who's a senior advisor in the office of the trade advisor to the president and has explained this. So I'm going to say this to you as it was presented to President Trump a year ago or more. Mr. President, China is at a precipice. It's going one of three ways. They are, one, becoming very aggressive, not just economically, where they're rolling all over the place through their Belt and Road Initiative, but even militarily, where they're now beginning to build naval bases around the world, mostly to protect their shipping lanes, right? Oil coming from the Middle East, their ability to come down through Africa, right? But through their Belt and Road Initiative, where they're helping to build infrastructure in these countries can't afford, right? Sri Lanka can't pay them back. What do? You let us, we'll cut the debt, but you let us build a naval base here. Wow, it's a big deal. Okay, so economically, they're a powerhouse dominating everybody. The Belt and Road Initiative, do I have that slide? I don't know if yeah, right? This is the Belt and Road Initiative. It goes all the way to Italy. The largest port in Greece is now Chinese. Ports in Italy are now Chinese, right? This is their ability. They're making sure that their goods and services can be delivered, but the political side of this comes in. All right, so they're either going to just roll over everybody and they're going to dominate the world, Mr. President, or they're going to have another problem. Remember the demographics rolling backwards. They've got a problem, if you want to call it a problem, with a rapidly growing Muslim population, particularly up in the Northwest, the Uyghur population. There's been phenomenal reporting on this. It's UIGHER, where they have put at least 1.5 million Uyghurs in re-education camps, where they're basically trying to drill the Islam out of them, the culture out of them, the whole bit, forcing them to take new names, separating children, the whole bit. Wow, why? What are they so worried about? Because they're worried this is just going to be an overflow and that there's going to be societal unrest. And when you drill into issues, and this is a great thing about the good old Google machine, how many protests were there in China last year? 500,000. Wait, what? For what? Start drilling into that a little bit. Environmental issues, political corruption, blah, 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 blah. There's incredible boiling beneath the surface. And this, Mr. President, is why President Xi seized power effectively and became president for life. Wrote himself into the Constitution because you have to have a strong man to root out the corruption and keep things together, right? That means they're rolling backwards. They've got huge debt issues, right? Things aren't as great as they seem, Mr. President, maybe. So they're either going to go forward and just roll over everybody, or they're going to roll backwards and they're going to screw up everything for everybody else, and we're going to see a revolution there. What do we do? So, Mr. President, go hard and go hard at them. And it's interesting when you look at the language that the president has used, his trade advisors are used, they are demanding that China fundamentally change their economic model. They say that. They must change their economic model. Now, wait a minute. Can you imagine China telling the United States you have to change your economic model? Wait a minute, we're capitalists. What does that mean? Same thing goes to the Chinese. They see this as a huge threat. But also the president's going very hard at them over three big issues: cyber theft, intellectual property, and market access. So they limit the amount of market access for US companies or any European, anybody else coming in. Intellectual property, what does that mean? You go and start a business in China, you have to hand over your intellectual property. This is how our business is run, this is our systems and everything else, this is our software. So yeah, we're just going to check to make sure it's all okay. Hey, you guys over here, you little Chinese startup, this is what they're doing, here you go. Gets handed over. Same thing as cyber theft. And the cyber theft issue is mind-blowing. We all know that here for government workers, right, that they have hacked in and stole all the government workers going back 40 years, all their background stuff. It's unbelievable, right? And the corporates in America have had it up to here with it. So if you're noticing in the trade war, corporate America is not saying anything. If you noticed, Apple's not complaining. Nobody's really complaining. It's hard, but we'll do what we got to do. We'll bring the businesses back. It's because they've had it, and they're quietly supporting the president. You see that Tim Cook from Apple has probably been into the White House 5 times this year. Tim Cook is a liberal Democrat, gay. I mean, come on. What? How many times can you have dinner with the president? The head of Google has been in there. All these, because go for it. Push, push, keep going. So keep doing all this stuff, Mr. President. And have you also noticed, have the Democrats criticized Trump? Who's the #1 critic of China in Washington, D.C. for the last 30 years? Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, #1 supporter of the Trump-China trade thing. Why? She represents San Francisco. So she, for 30-some years, has been a congresswoman, and she's used to having all these Chinese expats who come up and tell her all these years how bad things have been, human rights-wise. Nancy Pelosi's been deported from China for holding up a sign in Tiananmen Square, right? Okay, so that's over the past 30 years. But what's happened in the last 15 years, San Francisco became the high-tech center of the world. So she gets out of the car, because she's going to a fundraiser in the 40th floor of some billionaire high-tech guy, and she's hearing from all those same Chinese expats she's known forever how bad things are with the Uyghurs and everything else. She goes up 40 floors do a $20 million fundraiser for the Democratic National Party, which they all have to do. I'm not criticizing her. And all she's hearing about was our intellectual property got started. You know, the 5G situation with Huawei. 80% of Huawei's 5G capability is stolen from the United States. Bah, 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 bah. Get them, get them. So they're totally supportive. Have you heard in the Democratic debates anybody criticizing Trump over trade? Over the China trade thing? It's fascinating. The dog that doesn't bark, right? So, what's going to happen here? And now it's impacting, apparently, the economy and impacting you and your investments. Here's how we see this playing out. You're seeing a new Chinese delegation coming back over. Be here next week. Hopefully they all play kind of nice. All good. Second thing to watch from the market perspective. November 16th, 17th, the Asia Pacific Economic Council, Commission, APEC. It's a big trade meeting they have. It's in Santiago, Chile, of all places, but that's still part of the Pacific. Watch for President Trump to have a face-to-face with President Xi of China. Again, the markets, they'll see things went next week. They'll see things, oh, that's good, positive. Trump tweets, oh, we had really good meetings. We've made progress. Chinese say, yep. Then you get to this, yep, oh my God, Trump and Xi's together. Market takes off. And then you move to January and February and you begin to see the skeletal outlines of an actual deal. How that's going to be, I don't know. My prediction is it's going to be baby steps. We've agreed on this. We've agreed on the currency manipulation issue. We've agreed on a little bit more market access issue. Financial services can expand a little bit more. We need to control it here in China. We can't just change our economic model because you're asking us to change what we are. We're a communist country that's based off of technically communist economic theory, even though they're capitalist, whatever. We got to do this slow. All of a sudden, you're just seeing the economy right back up. This is the game plan. So watch for this to play out between now, first quarter, you begin to see a deal, things start happening, everybody is happy. Now, the big question is, what is the deal? Does Trump, this is the risk to him, does he go for the hardcore deal and say this is going to play out over several years, or does he go for the quick, we got a deal, but it's a hollow deal, meaning they're going to come in here and buy $500 billion of soybeans, Boeing planes, who knows what else, right? And this is a big boost and it helps level out the trade imbalance, but it doesn't fix those big 3 issues of cyber theft, intellectual property, and market access. At which point, you could see Republicans and particularly Democrats saying you've sold out America. You didn't do what you needed to do. You didn't do what you said you would do. So this is going to be hard deal or hollow deal. That's what he's going to have to sort of walk that thin line, knowing that if it's hollow deal, the markets will be on a sugar high, but longer term you'll see Apple and Oracle and everybody else coming after him. But again, I think, quite frankly, this is The Apprentice, the master marketer. Again, I'm not trying to be political, but I think this is how this plays out. And he bumps the market up, therefore, the Fed doesn't need to cut. And he's carrying water for the European Union. That's the other positive. This has a big impact on the European Union because they're not criticizing him either. The European Union has had to pass over twice as much intellectual property for their companies operating in China than the United States in the past year. They're like, he's our feral attack dog. Go. Take him off the chain. Let him go. They like him doing it. No criticism. This could potentially, oddly, lift the economics quite a bit. Here's the other interesting aspect. Again, I sound so cynical and cold. Climate change, which I truly, I'm a Reagan Republican at heart, though I try and be an independent analyst here. I am very worried about it for you guys around here. God, could the weather get any weirder? But interesting things happening. You can now ship through the Arctic. And the Arctic is now becoming the new foreign policy battlefront between Russia, China, the United States, and others, because you can start shipping. Think of the time cut. You don't have to go around the Horn of Africa. You don't have to go through the Suez. All of a sudden, things change. This is a huge shift. And you're going to hear and see a lot more, and it's going to do a lot for shipping and the cost of production and delivery. Watch for India. Trump is working hard for a free trade agreement there. That will be the big, I think that's more a second-term thing, but the biggest, one of the biggest economies in the world, and democracy, right? You had 1.3 billion people voting. It took 9 days, but they do it. Which, by the way, the Chinese drives Chinese nuts, because you're now beginning to hear this chatter. Hey, wait a minute. If they can do it down there, how come we can't do it? Big issue. And of course, there's a natural, they're the next superpower and economic superpower here. So all the balance of power globally is shifting. But if we get a free trade agreement with India, another huge positive economically going forward. Middle East. I'm not going to go too deep on this, other than to say this. One of the things of the administration, again, the smoke, right? The growth of the oil and gas sector in the United States. You can take out huge portions of the Saudi oil fields, and we're not pushing cars at gas stations because of shortages, because the U.S. has so much been brought online. This is the big issue. This is the big infrastructure positive to the markets that the markets is only beginning to gradually see, right? Pipelines, what's happening in New Orleans, in Baltimore, Los Angeles, the delivery of natural gas and oil, et cetera, et cetera. The private sector's doing a lot of this from an infrastructure perspective, and this is going to be a long-term positive for the U.S., and we're not going to have to worry about oil or gas 10 years from now, and maybe even sooner. So that will change the issues over there, and you're going to see increasingly the U.S. pulling back a bit. But it's everywhere. I was in Greece a year ago speaking at a client event. I know it's hardship work, but somebody has to do it. And this was going on. Huge natural gas and oil has been found this area off Cyprus, off the Greek portion. So here's Greece, the basket case of the world economically, now about to become a super oil and gas rich nation, from which everything will start being transmitted to Europe. They'll become the supplier of energy to Europe. What a turn of events. And for Turkey, it's the flip side. There's not much on the other side. Now the Turks are contesting this, it's a problem, but for Greece, wow. So invest in Greece and maybe go check out your investments, right? Springtime, wintertime, it's a good time to go. Make sure your investment's good. I love this quote. This is by the he just left as the foreign minister of Germany, We're the last geopolitical vegetarians in a world of carnivores. Got that right. So what's going to happen there? I think there's going to be a hard Brexit. I don't see any way out of this. I think there's probably going to be an election. It's going to be a hard Brexit, and then we roll right into some sort of US-UK free trade agreement. It's going to be scary. It's going to be ugly. But I think that's where this is going to happen. And I think the thing that worries me is it ends up being more harmful to continental Europe than to the UK. I was over in London 3 weeks ago, and they're talking about, well, there's going to be food shortages, and this is going to be terrible. All of a sudden then studies started coming out how the Germans are going to get hurt and the French are going to be hurt. I think at the end of the day, it all comes out. It'll be a little scary, but it'll end up being a hard Brexit. Thank you, everybody.